Long before history books recorded the rise and fall of empires, ancient civilizations whispered secrets to the stars, carved them into stone, and buried them deep beneath the earth. These were not just stories, they were sacred acts, rituals so powerful they shaped destinies and bridged the gap between the mortal world and the divine. Imagine standing in the heart of a forgotten temple, where the air hums with the echoes of chants spoken thousands of years ago, where every symbol on the walls holds a meaning we're only beginning to decipher. This is the world we're about to step into, a world where the line between magic and reality blurred, where rituals weren't just ceremonies but lifelines to the unseen forces that guided entire societies. From the depths of the Amazon to the sands of Mesopotamia, lost civilizations left behind clues, strange artifacts, cryptic inscriptions, and legends that defy explanation. Why did the Maya sacrifice jewels to sacred wells? What drove the builders of Stonehenge to align massive stones with the movements of the sun and moon? These aren't just curiosities, they're windows into how our ancestors made sense of the universe, how they sought to control the uncontrollable, to speak to gods and ancestors whose voices have long since faded into silence. The rituals we'll explore weren't mere superstition, they were the heartbeat of cultures that thrived, fought, and vanished, leaving behind puzzles that still captivate us today. This journey isn't just about unearthing the past, it's about rediscovering a part of ourselves. These ancient practices reveal a universal human longing to find meaning, to connect with something greater, to leave a mark that outlasts time itself. As we unravel 25 of history's most mystical rituals, you'll witness the ingenuity, the desperation, and the sheer wonder that drove these civilizations to perform acts that seem impossible to modern eyes. Some will shock you, others might make you question what you thought you knew about history, but all of them will remind you that the past is far stranger and far more fascinating than we often dare to imagine. So let's begin where the shadows of forgotten gods still linger and the secrets of the ancients wait to be told. Among the most striking rituals of the ancient Maya was the act of bloodletting, a sacred ceremony that pierced the veil between the human and divine. This wasn't mere spectacle, it was a desperate plea, a cosmic bargain struck with the gods to keep the world from collapsing. Kings and queens, draped in jade and quetzal feathers, would draw their own blood using stingray spines, obsidian blades, or intricately carved bone awls. The sharper the pain, the more potent the offering. They believed their blood carried the essence of life itself, a sacred currency that nourished the deities who held the universe in balance. Picture a royal courtyard at dawn, the air thick with incense as the ruler prepares for the ritual. With a swift, practiced motion, they'd pierce their tongue, their earlobes, or even the sensitive flesh between their fingers. Blood would drip onto strips of bark paper, later burned in ceremonial fires, the smoke carrying their prayers skyward. But this wasn't just about royalty. Entire communities participated, with nobles and priests offering their blood in tandem, reinforcing the idea that every drop spilled was a thread holding the fabric of reality together. The Maya saw the cosmos as fragile, a delicate equilibrium that required constant maintenance. Droughts, failed crops, even the movement of the stars, all were signs the gods needed appeasement. Bloodletting wasn't just sacrifice, it was stewardship, a way to fuel the sun's journey across the sky or coax rain from the heavens. Some rituals coincided with celestial events like the passing of Venus, believed to be the embodiment of the warrior god Kukulkan. On those nights, blood offerings reached a fever pitch, the entire city pulsating with chants and the metallic scent of devotion. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of these ceremonies was the hallucinatory trances they induced. Blood loss, combined with ritual fasting and potent entheogens, transported participants into visions, a bridge to the spirit world where they could speak directly to ancestors and gods. These weren't hallucinations to the Maya, they were revelations, proof that the ritual worked. Imagine standing in that moment, your body weakened but your spirit soaring, convinced you just brushed fingertips with the divine. To dismiss this as mere superstition misses the point. The Maya built towering cities, mapped the stars with uncanny precision, and yet they also believed their survival hinged on these intimate acts of pain and faith. That duality is what makes their bloodletting ceremonies so mesmerizing, not just for their shock value, but for what they reveal about how deeply ritual could bind a civilization to its gods, to its land, and to the terrifying beauty of a universe that demanded blood as the price of existence. The ancient Egyptians believed death wasn't an end, but a doorway, one that required the right key to unlock. That key was the opening of the mouth ceremony, a ritual so vital it could mean the difference between eternal life and oblivion. Picture a tomb draped in flickering torchlight, the air heavy with myrrh as a priest raises a ceremonial adze, a blade not meant to cut flesh, but to restore senses stolen by death itself. This was no mere funeral rite, it was a reawakening, a magical reboot of the soul's most essential faculties. At its core, the ritual revolved around a startling idea: the afterlife wasn't passive. The dead needed to eat, drink, even breathe just as they had in life, but without a living body, these acts required divine intervention. Enter the Sem priest, clad in leopard skin, who'd touch the mummy's lips with tools imbued with cosmic power. The adze, shaped like the Big Dipper, connected the deceased to the northern stars, the eternal throne of Osiris. A forked pea-shent knife channeled the energy of the gods, while a ram-headed amulet pulsed with the life force of Ra himself. Each instrument had a purpose, each gesture a hidden meaning. The climax came when the priest pressed a finger of iron or bronze to the mummy's mouth. Iron, believed to be the bones of the gods, held celestial power. This single touch was said to release the soul's personality from its paralysis, allowing it to speak its name before Osiris's judging scales. Without this, the dead might remain mute and starving in Juat, the Egyptian underworld, doomed to wander as shadows, but the ritual didn't stop there. Famously, a bull's foreleg was raised to the mummy's lips, symbolizing the offering of sustenance. The heart of a living animal, still warm, might be presented to represent rebirth, a visceral metaphor even modern minds find striking. What makes this ceremony so fascinating is its layered symbolism. The tools weren't just props, they were constellations, deities, and cosmic principles made tangible. The incantations, drawn from the pyramid texts and later the Book of the Dead, didn't merely accompany the ritual, they activated it. Priests weren't just performers, they were surgeons of the soul, reattaching spiritual limbs severed by death. And the mummy itself became more than a preserved body. After the ceremony, it was considered a vessel humming with potential life, ready to receive offerings from descendants for millennia. This obsession with sensory revival speaks volumes about Egyptian values. To them, existence without voice was imprisonment, without breath, suffocation, without taste, a joyless eternity. The opening of the mouth didn't just ensure survival, it guaranteed abundance, ensuring the deceased could savor the aroma of roasted duck, feel the coolness of wine, and chant hymns alongside gods. Modern archaeology confirms how seriously this was taken. Tombs from the Old Kingdom to the Ptolemaic period show where around the mouths of statues evidence of real-world rituals performed for centuries. Even Akhenaten, the radical pharaoh who rejected traditional gods, couldn't abandon this rite entirely. Perhaps what resonates most is how human it all feels. Across 3,000 years of Egyptian history, through conquests and dynastic collapses, the fear of being silenced by death remained constant. The opening of the mouth mirrors our own deepest anxieties of fading into obscurity, of voices unheard, of hungers unfulfilled. In that dimly lit tomb with chants rising like smoke, the ancient Egyptians fought back against silence itself. and in doing so, they left us a powerful testament that civilizations may crumble, but the desire to be remembered, to truly live beyond death, is timeless. For the Aztecs, time wasn't just a measurement, it was a fragile thread, one that could snap and plunge the world into eternal darkness if not carefully tended. Every 52 years, as their sacred calendars aligned, the empire held its breath. This was the moment of the New Fire Ceremony, a night when every flame in the land was extinguished, when the stars themselves seemed to pause, waiting to see if the sun would rise again. Imagine the silence that fell over Tenochtitlan as midnight approached. No cooking fires, no torches, not even the embers of a hearth flickering in the darkness. The Aztecs believed that if their rituals failed, the fifth sun, the era they lived in, would perish, and monstrous Tzitzimitl star demons would descend to devour humanity. At the heart of this ritual was the sacrifice of a captive warrior, chosen for his physical perfection. As priests dressed in the regalia of gods ascended the steps of Huaxtitlan Hill, the entire valley watched from the blackened city below. The victim's chest was sliced open, his still beating heart offered to the heavens. But the true climax came next, as the priest thrust a wooden drill into the gaping wound, spinning it against the sternum until, with a burst of flame, a new fire roared to life. This wasn't just a spark. It was the rebirth of the sun itself, snatched from the jaws of oblivion. From that single blaze, runners carried torches to every corner of the empire, racing against the dawn to relight temples, homes, and marketplaces. The moment those flames caught, a wave of relief and euphoria swept through the people. Drums pounded, conch shells blared, and families pierced their ears and tongues, letting their own blood mingle with the earth in gratitude. Even children wore masks to hide their faces, lest the gods mistake their joy for arrogance. The Aztecs didn't just celebrate survival, they reaffirmed their cosmic contract with the divine, proving once again that their prayers, their blood, could stave off annihilation. What's remarkable is how deeply this ceremony permeated daily life. In the years leading up to the event, debts were settled, old grudges forgiven, and broken tools discarded, a symbolic cleansing to match the world's renewal. Homes were scrubbed, pottery shattered, and even hearthstones replaced, as if the very fabric of existence needed resetting. The New Fire Ceremony wasn't just ritual, it was societal chemotherapy, burning away the old to make space for the new. Archaeological evidence suggests the terror was real. Excavations reveal caches of perfectly preserved household items buried just before the ceremony, precious figurines, grinding stones, even tiny effigies of gods, all ritually killed by breaking them, as if their usefulness expired with the dying sun. And then there's the art. Florentine codex illustrations show families clutching their children, faces taut with fear as they watched the horizon for that first glow of flame. This wasn't pageantry, it was a civilization holding its breath, utterly convinced that their actions held the stars in place. The genius of the Aztec worldview lies in its brutal poetry. Unlike cultures that saw time as linear, they lived in a universe of cycles, ones that demanded payment. Fire wasn't just a tool, it was the physical manifestation of the sun's covenant with humanity. Extinguishing every flame in the land was an act of faith, a collective gamble that the gods would accept their offering and reignite creation. When dawn broke the next morning and the world still stood, it wasn't just luck, it was proof that ritual, no matter how harrowing, worked. In that shared exhale of relief, the Aztecs didn't just survive another cycle. They rekindled their place in the cosmos, one sacred flame at a time. In the frozen fjords of Scandinavia, where the northern lights twisted like serpents across the sky, the Vikings practiced a magic so potent it blurred the lines between prophecy and madness. Seiðr wasn't just sorcery, it was a bridge to the unseen, a tangled web of spells spun by seeresses who could unravel fate itself. Picture a lone figure seated on a high platform, draped in a cloak of raven feathers, her staff tapping rhythmically against the earth as chants rose into the frigid air. Around her, warriors, men who laughed in the face of battle, shifted uneasily. even among a people who revered Odin's mystical prowess, seiðr carried whispers of taboo, a craft as revered as it was feared. At its core, seiðr was the art of weaving destiny. Practitioners, known as völvers, entered trances so deep they could converse with spirits, summon storms, or peer into the threads of time to foresee victory or famine. Some legends speak of them binding the wills of enemies with enchanted cords, or casting curses that made swords shatter in their scabbards, but the most striking aspect. This power was overwhelmingly wielded by women. In a society where axes and longships defined prestige, seiðr carved out a space where female voices held undeniable authority, a paradox that both fascinated and unsettled the Norse world. The rituals themselves were spectral theater. A völva might journey to the spirit world atop a wooden platform, her soul riding the rhythm of drums while her body remained entranced. She'd carry a staff carved with runes, not as a weapon but as a conduit to the dead. Offerings of bread, meat, and even precious metals were laid out to coax spirits into answering her questions. The sagas describe these sessions in eerie detail, how the seeress's eyes rolled back until only the white showed, how her voice dropped to a whisper that wasn't wholly her own. When she spoke, it was with the weight of ancestors or gods breathing through her words that could send kings to war or spare villages from plague. Yet for all its power, seiðr walked a razor's edge in Norse culture. The practice was tinged with urgi, a term implying unmanliness or dishonor because it involved passive trance states, taboo for men in a warrior society. Even Odin, the All-Father, paid a price for mastering it. The Lokasenna, an ancient poem, mocks him for practicing witchcraft like a witch, a jab at his willingness to embrace the feminine to gain knowledge. This double standard reveals a deeper tension. The Vikings relied on seiðr's insights but distrusted its methods, a contradiction that left völvers both sought after and sidelined. Perhaps the most haunting legacy of seiðr lies in its aftermath. Excavations of Viking graves have revealed staffs buried with women of high status, their bones curled around these tools like sleeping dragons. At Firkat in Denmark, a völva's grave held not just her staff but a box of talismans, raven claws, owl feathers, and herbs still pungent after 1,000 years. These weren't mere trinkets, they were the toolkit of a woman who'd walked between worlds. And then there are the sagas, where völvers appear like ghosts at pivotal moments, foretelling the fall of heroes or the birth of legends, their prophecies unfolding with chilling precision long after their deaths. What makes seiðr so mesmerizing isn't just its magic, but what it says about the Norse mind. Here was a culture that celebrated brute strength yet made room for whispered divination, that prized honor but feared the very sorcery it depended on. The völvers stood at that crossroads, their rituals a reminder that even the fiercest warriors knew some battles couldn't be won with steel alone. In their chants, in the twist of their staffs, they held a truth as sharp as any blade. That destiny wasn't just fought, it was woven one spell at a time. In the dust-choked ruins of Mesopotamia, where ziggurats scraped the heavens, kings didn't just rule, they became lovers of the gods. The sacred marriage rite, or hieros gamos, was no ordinary ceremony. It was a thunderclap of symbolism where a mortal ruler's bed became an altar, and intimacy transformed into the ultimate act of statecraft. Imagine the scene, a priestess embodying the goddess Inanna or Ishtar, ascending the temple steps in robes woven with constellations, about to perform a ritual that would bind heaven to earth, harvest to kingdom, divine will to human law. For the Sumerians and Babylonians, this wasn't mere pageantry. The rite's roots stretched back to the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, to cities like Uruk, where kings like Dumuzi played the role of the shepherd consort to Inanna. Their union, real or symbolic, wasn't about romance. It was cosmic insurance. The priestess's body became a vessel for the goddess's power. The king's participation proved his divine mandate. When they came together, it was believed the land itself would quicken, fields would swell with grain, rivers would thicken with fish, and wombs would stir with life. Tablet fragments describe the act in startlingly visceral terms. He laid her down upon the fragrant bed, let him plant the seed of the throne in the palace walls. But beneath the sacred veneer pulsed raw political genius. The ritual sanctified the king's authority, making rebellion not just treason but blasphemy. A ruler who wed Ishtar didn't just command armies, he channeled her ferocity in battle, her allure in diplomacy. The ceremony often coincided with the New Year festival, Akitu, a time when the universe itself was thought to renew. By tying his reign to this celestial reboot, the king became inseparable from the natural order. Even the famed Hammurabi likely underwent this rite, his laws framed not as human edicts but as gifts from the divine marriage bed. What shocks modern audiences is how literal some interpretations were. Certain texts imply the priestess and king performed actual intercourse, with crowds listening outside the chamber for the goddess's cries of pleasure, a sound believed to bless the coming year. Other versions suggest symbolic enactments where the priestess placed the king's hand between her thighs in a gesture of sovereignty. Either way, the act blurred lines between sacred and erotic, private and public. Temple hymns describe Inanna's vulva as the horn of the wild ox, both weapon and life-giver, a metaphor that left no doubt about the ritual's potency. The rite's decline mirrored Mesopotamia's fading power. As empires rose and fell, the sacred marriage became more allegory than act, its magic diluted by time. Yet its legacy lingers. In the Song of Solomon, the earthy passion between lovers echoes Ishtar's hymns. Even today, when politicians speak of marrying policy to public need or artists describe conceiving ideas, they unknowingly channel this ancient belief that creation, whether of crops or kingdoms, begins in the charged space where mortal and divine embrace. Perhaps what resonates most is how the Mesopotamians saw no division between body and belief. To them, sex wasn't profane, it was the original liturgy, a prayer written in sweat and sigh. In a world where kings now rule through spreadsheets and sound bites, there's something haunting about a time when power was renewed not by election, but by ecstasy, when the fate of nations rested on a night when heaven itself was invited under the sheets. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the sky bruises to cobalt, the Inca performed rituals that still send shivers down modern spines. The Capacocha ceremony wasn't merely a sacrifice, it was an act of sacred diplomacy, a negotiation between earth and heaven conducted through the most precious currency imaginable, flawless children. Chosen for their beauty and purity, these boys and girls became living bridges to the gods, ascending mountainsides not as victims, but as honored ambassadors destined to dwell eternally with the divine. The selection process began years in advance. Scouts searched villages for children unmarked by blemish or illness, their physical perfection seen as a sign of divine favor. Once chosen, their lives transformed. These children, often as young as 6, were brought to Cusco, the empire's beating heart, where they feasted on rich foods like llama meat and maize beer, their bodies prepared for the ultimate journey. Some accounts suggest they were married symbolically to each other in lavish ceremonies, dressed in fine tunics woven with gold threads, their faces painted with sacred pigments. This wasn't cruelty. To the Inca, it was elevation. These children would never know hunger, never feel the weight of labor, only joy until their final moments. The procession to the mountaintop was itself a ritual. Priests, nobles, and the chosen children walked for weeks along the Quhapacñan, the empire's vast road system, stopping at Huaca's shrines to make offerings. As they climbed higher, the air grew thin, the temperatures plummeted. At certain points, the children were given chicha, a fermented drink likely laced with coca or other substances to ease their fear. Recent forensic studies show no signs of struggle in their remains, only peaceful expressions, as if they'd slipped into sleep. The final act was methodical, almost tender. At the summit, priests would settle each child into a carefully prepared grave, wrapping them in exquisite textiles alongside gold figurines, shell necklaces, and miniature offerings. Some were given a single draught of chicha before their spirits left their bodies, either through blunt force trauma or exposure. The cold, thin air then performed its own miracle, freeze-drying the bodies into near-perfect mummies, their skin still supple, their eyelashes intact after 5 centuries. Modern archaeology has unveiled haunting details. The Luleloko maiden, found at 22,000 feet in Argentina, still clutches a feather headdress, her face dusted with ceremonial powder. Scans reveal her last meal, a stew rich with protein eaten hours before death. Another boy, dubbed Lightning Child, shows burns from a post-mortem lightning strike, his body positioned as if watching over the empire forever. These weren't discarded offerings, they were eternal guardians preserved by altitude and intent. What unsettles us today reveals the Inca's profound worldview. Unlike cultures that sacrificed prisoners or slaves, they offered their best unblemished children because only the worthy could stand before the gods. These sacrifices coincided with disasters or pivotal events, volcanic eruptions, the death of an emperor, even the construction of new temples. By sending their perfect children into the sky, the Inca believed they maintained the world's balance, ensuring the sun's return, the soil's fertility, the empire's survival. The mummies' serene faces force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. In the Inca universe, this was no tragedy. These children became immortal, their frozen brows forever kissed by the sun god in Tai, their spirits woven into the fabric of the mountains they once climbed. Where we see loss, they saw transcendence, a belief so powerful it turned snow-packed peaks into sacred meeting places between humanity and the divine. As the last chill of winter faded from the emerald hills of ancient Ireland, the Celts prepared for a night when the veil between worlds grew thin, not the dark spectre of Samhain but Beltane, a festival of fire, fertility, and fearless celebration. On the eve of May 1st, when the Pleiades star cluster glittered overhead, communities gathered to light twin bonfires on hilltops, their flames licking the twilight like primal tongues. These weren't just sources of warmth, they were portals. Cattle, the lifeblood of Celtic society, were driven between the fires in a ritual purification, their hides brushed by smoke believed to shield them from disease and misfortune in the coming year. The symbolism ran deeper than livestock protection. Beltane marked the moment when the earth itself was considered most fertile, its energies bursting forth in blossoms and newborn livestock. Couples would slip into newly green fields, their unions mirroring the sacred marriage of land and sky. Young women washed their faces in mourning dew gathered from hawthorn trees, the May bush believing it bestowed eternal beauty. Even the ashes from Beltane fires held power, scattered across fields to ensure bountiful harvests. Every act, from the largest bonfire to the most private whisper, was a thread in the tapestry of renewal. What set Beltane apart was its unapologetic joy. Where Samhain embraced the dead, Beltane celebrated the living, the riotous, unstoppable force of growth. Villagers danced around maypoles, their ribbons weaving patterns meant to echo the serpentine paths of earth energies. Doors were draped with yellow flowers, colors chosen to mimic the sun's golden fire. Homes built during the previous year were smudged with torches lit from the sacred bonfires, their thresholds blessed against unseen malice. The air itself seemed charged, thick with the scent of burning hawthorn and the laughter of those who'd survived another winter. Archaeological clues hint at how deeply Beltane was woven into daily life. At Tara, the legendary seat of Irish kings, evidence of massive fire pits aligns with descriptions of Hill of the Fire's ceremonies. Folklore recounts how failing to light a Beltane fire could bring drought or blight, a communal responsibility taken deadly seriously. Even the placement of bonfires mattered. They were often lit at boundaries between villages, a reminder that protection and prosperity knew no borders when the world was in balance. The festival's resilience is perhaps its most striking feature. Long after Christianity spread across Ireland, Beltane endured, its fires relit as St. John's Eve celebrations, its maypoles rebranded but still twirled. Modern pagans still gather at dawn on May 1st, their hands sticky with do as they whisper old prayers. There's a reason this ritual outlasted empires. It taps into something primal, the human pulse that quickens at spring's return. Beltane wasn't just a date on a calendar. It was and is a defiant shout against darkness, a promise that life, like flame, always finds a way to begin again. On the sun-baked courtyards of ancient Crete, where frescoes of dolphins leaped across palace walls, young men and women faced a beast that symbolized raw power and divine fury, the bull. This was no ordinary confrontation. Minoan bull leaping wasn't about killing the animal or proving brute strength. It was a breathtaking dance with danger, a ritual so audacious it blurred the line between sport and sacrament. Imagine the scene, a muscular bull charging at full speed, its hooves pounding the earth, while an acrobat clad in nothing but a loincloth sprinted toward it, grasped the horns, and used the beast's own momentum to somersault over its back. One mistimed move meant goring or worse, yet for the Minoans this wasn't recklessness, it was communion. The bull held sacred status in their culture, linked to their enigmatic storm god, sometimes called the master of animals, whose roar was said to shake the heavens. Frescoes at Knossos depict bull leapers mid-flight, their bodies arched gracefully as if suspended between worlds. Some scholars argue these weren't just artistic flourishes but records of real ceremonies, where human agility and bovine might fused into a single sacred spectacle. The act itself followed a precise choreography. First, the leaper seized the bull's horns as it lowered its head. Then, in a heartbeat, they'd vault upward, tucking their knees to clear the spine before landing ideally upright behind the animal. Success demanded split-second timing, a blend of courage and physics that left no room for hesitation. But was it ritual or entertainment? The debate splits experts. Some point to the bull's prominence in Minoan art and religious symbols, suggesting the leapers weren't athletes but priests enacting a myth. In this view, the bull embodied untamed nature, and the leap symbolized humanity's triumph over chaos. Others counter that the lack of sacrificial remains near bull courts implies a sporting event, albeit one soaked in spiritual significance. A third theory posits it was both, a rite of passage where only those who danced with the bull proved worthy of adulthood or leadership. The truth may lie in the middle. For the Minoans, the distinction between play and prayer might not have existed. Archaeology adds layers to the mystery. At Knossos, a stone bull ring with tiered seating suggests public spectatorship, while smaller courtyards in palaces hint at more exclusive ceremonies. Tools like the double-edged labrys axe, often found near bull imagery, hint at sacrificial undertones, though no evidence confirms bulls were killed post-leaping. Then there's the gender question. Unlike later Greek traditions, Minoan frescoes show women leapers alongside men, their ochre-painted skin gleaming as they performed the same death-defying stunts. Were they priestesses, nobles? The answers crumble with the ruins. What lingers is the ritual's visceral poetry. Unlike the Aztec bloodletting or Inca child sacrifices, this was a fleeting moment of harmony between human and beast, a testament to skill over slaughter. When the leaper's hands met the horns, it wasn't domination, it was collaboration. The bull's raw power became the acrobat's wings, and for that suspended second, they were locked in a pact older than civilization itself. The delicate balance between reverence for nature and the audacity to defy it. Modern bullfighting's brutality feels crude by comparison. The Minoans didn't seek to conquer the bull. They sought to move with it, to touch the divine not through submission, but through sublime, gravity-defying grace. For 12 days and nights under the blistering Indian sun, priests of the Vedic tradition undertook a ritual so monumental it blurred the lines between architecture and prayer, the Agnikayana. This wasn't just lighting a fire, it was rebuilding the cosmos itself, one brick at a time. At its heart stood the construction of a colossal fire altar shaped like a soaring eagle, its wings outstretched as if ready to carry offerings to the gods. Each layer of this five-tiered structure held cosmic significance: earth, atmosphere, sky, the constellations, and the infinite beyond, meticulously assembled from thousands of hand-molded clay bricks. But here's where it turns transcendent. Every brick was placed not just with mortar, but with a whispered hymn from the Rig Veda, each syllable a thread in the fabric of creation. The preparation alone was a feat of devotion. Teams of priests gathered clay from specific riverbanks, mixed it with water drawn at auspicious moments, and shaped bricks imprinted with sacred symbols. The altar's design wasn't arbitrary. The eagle form represented Agni, the fire god, his wings spanning nearly 15 feet in some ceremonies, a physical manifestation of divine energy. As the structure rose, so did the chanting, voices weaving through the air like smoke. The Samavda's melodic hymns transformed the worksite into a living hymn book, every note believed to vibrate in harmony with celestial forces. Day after day, the rituals intensified. Priests poured clarified butter into the altar's flames, the ghee hissing like 1,000 serpents as it vanished into light. Animals, sometimes goats, occasionally horses, were sacrificed, their flesh consumed not by humans but by the fire itself, a symbolic return of life to its elemental source. But the most startling moment came on the final day, when the priests performed the ascent to heaven. Climbing a ladder perched against the altar, they'd chant verses describing their journey through the realms, a literal and metaphorical elevation from the earthly to the divine. What makes the Agnikayama unforgettable is its layered philosophy. The altar's dismantling after the ceremony mirrored the Hindu belief in the universe's cyclical destruction and renewal. Even the bricks weren't just discarded, they were scattered in rivers, returning to the earth like seeds of future rituals. Modern scholars liken it to a yajna, a cosmic exchange where offerings weren't just given but transformed, where fire became a mouth through which the gods tasted human devotion. Archaeological finds in places like Korshambai reveal ancient fire altars matching Vedic descriptions, their bricks still bearing finger grooves from priests who pressed them into place 3,000 years ago. Today, though rarely performed due to its staggering complexity, the Agnikayama endures in fragments, in temple rituals where miniature fire altars echo its shape, or in the way modern Hindu weddings still invoke Agni as witness. It stands as a testament to a time when humans didn't just worship the divine, they built stairways to meet it, brick by consecrated brick. Deep in the steamy jungles of ancient Mesoamerica, where ceiba trees stretched toward the heavens like living temples, the Olmec civilization practiced a ritual so visceral it blurred the boundaries between man and beast. At the heart of their spiritual world loomed the word jaguar, a fearsome fusion of human and big cat, its snarl etched into colossal stone heads and delicate jade figurines. But this wasn't mere mythology. For Olmec shamans, becoming the jaguar was a sacred metamorphosis, achieved through hallucinogenic trances, bloodletting, and rituals that allowed them to stalk the spirit world as apex predators of the unseen. The transformation began with the sacred ceiba tree, believed to connect the underworld, earth, and sky. Shamans would ingest potent concoctions of psychoactive plants, perhaps the seeds of the ololuqui vine or the flesh of the toadstool known as Tiana Nakatl, flesh of the gods. As the toxins coursed through their veins, their bodies convulsed, their senses sharpened, pupils dilated into vertical slits mirroring the jaguar's gaze. In this altered state, they didn't just imagine the change. They felt fur erupt from their skin, claws sprout from their fingertips. To bystanders, the shaman's growls and predatory movements weren't performance. They were proof the ritual had worked. Archaeology confirms the centrality of this belief. At sites like La Venta, jade figurines depict infants with unmistakable jaguar features, downturned mouths, cleft heads, and almond-shaped eyes. Some scholars argue these represent a mythical race of jaguars, born from unions between humans and the big cats. Others see them as portraits of actual children, perhaps offspring of rulers believed to carry jaguar bloodlines. The most striking evidence comes from ritual deposits, jade celts and axes carved with half-human, half-jaguar faces, buried as offerings to sanctify the bond between species. The Olmec's obsession with jaguars wasn't arbitrary. In a world where the big cat ruled both the jungle's shadows and the night's darkness, its power was supernatural. To channel that strength, shamans donned jaguar pelts, their fingers brushing claws and teeth as they danced. Bloodletting intensified the connection spines of stingrays piercing tongues or earlobes, the pain and endorphins heightening the trance. Murals at Chalcatzingo show figures with jaguar maws emerging from their heads, as if the beast spirit had fully possessed them. What makes this ritual extraordinary is its enduring legacy. Centuries after the Olmec decline, Maya kings would adopt jaguar titles, their thrones draped in pelts. Aztec warriors strutted in jaguar skin suits, embodying the animal's ferocity. Even today, Amazonian tribes perform jaguar dances, their steps echoing Olmec rites. The word jaguar wasn't just a symbol, it was a spiritual technology, a way for humans to borrow the jungle's untamed majesty. In those hallucinogenic trances, Olmec shamans didn't just play at being beasts, they became bridges between worlds, their roars echoing long after their civilization vanished into the vine. For over 1,000 years, the holiest secret of the ancient Mediterranean wasn't carved into stone or written on scrolls. It was whispered in the darkness of a torch-lit hall near Athens. The Eleusinian mysteries, dedicated to Demeter and her daughter Persephone, weren't just rituals, they were transformative experiences so profound that speaking of them carried a penalty of death. Picture a procession of initiates walking the sacred way from Athens to Eleusis, their feet dusty from the 14-mile journey, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They'd fasted for days, drunk a special barley potion called kykeon, and now stood at the threshold of the Telesterion, a windowless temple where the mysteries unfolded. What happened inside was so powerful that even skeptical minds like Plato and Cicero refused to break their oaths of silence, leaving modern scholars to piece together fragments of truth from whispers and artifacts. At the core of the ceremony lay the myth of Persephone, her abduction by Hades, Demeter's grief-stricken search, and their eventual reunion. But initiates didn't just hear this story, they lived it. The rituals likely involved staged reenactments, with priests taking the roles of gods, their voices echoing through the hall as torches flickered. Some accounts describe sudden appearances of Persephone from the underworld, achieved through hidden trapdoors or clever lighting. Yet the most compelling theory involves the kykeon itself. Researchers like Albert Hofmann, father of LSD, suggested the drink might have contained ergot, a fungus with psychoactive properties that grows on barley. If true, initiates didn't just watch Persephone's journey, they hallucinated it, their visions blending with ritual theatrics to create an indelible psychic imprint. The secrecy surrounding Eleusis wasn't mere superstition. It was theatrical genius. By forbidding disclosure, the rites maintained an aura of exclusivity that drew emperors and slaves alike. Everyone from Hercules to Marcus Aurelius sought initiation, yet none wrote more than cryptic allusions to seeing and hearing something ineffable. The few surviving hints are tantalizing. A single wheat stalk shown in silence, possibly symbolizing rebirth, the clash of gongs simulating Persephone's descent, and a moment where priests unveiled a golden ear of grain, an emblem of life's cyclical nature. Archaeological digs at Eleusis reveal artifacts like the famous Ninian tablet, depicting Demeter and Persephone with torches, their faces serene yet charged with meaning. What made these mysteries endure for nearly 2 millennia wasn't just their spectacle, but their emotional resonance. In a world where death was omnipresent, Eleusis offered something radical, the promise that demise wasn't an end but a transition as natural as the seasons. Unlike the flashy miracles of other cults, the power here was internal, a shift in perception so profound that, as Cicero claimed, initiates learned not only how to live joyfully but also how to die with better hope. Modern parallels emerge in psychedelic therapy, where controlled substances induce transformative experiences. The ancients might have stumbled onto a similar truth, that some revelations can't be taught, only felt, and once felt they defy words. Even after Christian emperors shuttered Eleusis in the 4th century, its influence pulsed underground. Early Christian baptisms borrowed its imagery of light in darkness, while Renaissance artists covertly encoded its symbols into paintings. Today, as scientists study how psychedelics rewire depression, we're left wondering if the Greeks had mastered a kind of spiritual medicine, one where mystery, chemistry, and stagecraft merged to heal the soul's deepest wounds. The Telesterians' ruins still stand, their stones mute witnesses to ceremonies that made eternity tangible. Perhaps that was the real secret all along, that in the right conditions, even mortals can glimpse the divine, if only for one electrifying night. In the turquoise waters of the Pacific, where coral reefs glow like submerged galaxies, Polynesian fishermen performed a ritual that defied the natural order. They didn't hunt sharks, they summoned them. Shark calling, practiced across islands from New Ireland to the Solomons, was no brute display of dominance. It was a sacred negotiation, a pact between species sealed with chants older than memory. Before setting out, callers would fast and abstain from intimacy, their bodies purified to carry the weight of the encounter. They'd carve wooden effigies of sharks, whispering promises of respect into the grain, then paddle their canoes to the calling grounds with nothing but a noose and a song. The moment of summoning was as precise as it was perilous. Standing in waist-deep water or balanced on the canoe's edge, the caller would strike the surface rhythmically with coconut leaf bundles, creating vibrations that mimicked distressed prey. Then came the chants, low, guttural phrases passed down through generations, their meanings often lost even to the singers. These weren't arbitrary sounds, they were sonic keys believed to unlock a shark's curiosity. Within minutes, dark shapes would emerge from the depths, drawn not by hunger but by the call itself. What happened next blurred the line between ritual and reality. Some sharks allowed themselves to be lightly noosed and led ashore, as if consenting to their role in the ceremony. Others circled patiently while offerings of pork or taro were placed in their jaws, not as bait but as reciprocal gifts. The most striking accounts describe sharks lingering long after the rituals, escorting canoes back to shore like aquatic guardians. To outsiders, this seemed like madness. To the callers, it was proof of an ancient understanding that sharks weren't just predators but kin whose presence balanced the ocean's delicate web. Archaeology offers glimpses into how deep this bond ran. On Lelepa Island, petroglyphs depict shark-human hybrids, their bodies fused in eternal dance. In Vanuatu, ceremonial drums bear shark skin membranes, their beats said to echo the predator's heartbeat. Even the tools used bone hooks shaped like crescent moons. Ropes woven from coconut fiber were crafted with ritual precision, each knot tied with incantations. Modern marine biologists marvel at the ecological wisdom embedded in these practices. By targeting only mature sharks and releasing pregnant females, callers maintained populations millennia before conservation science existed. The ritual's power lay in its duality. For communities living at the ocean's mercy, shark calling was both practical and profound, a way to secure food while honoring the sea's most formidable spirit. When Christianity and colonialism swept the Pacific, many calling traditions vanished, but in scattered villages whispers remain. Elders still teach the old chants in secret, their voices carrying across water just as they did centuries ago. In a world that now fears sharks, these rituals remind us of a time when humans didn't seek to conquer nature, but to converse with it, one primal song at a time. High on the wind-ravaged plateaus of Tibet, where the air is too thin for trees and the ground too hard for digging, the dead are given back to the sky in one of the world's most profound funerary rites. Sky burial, or jeta, meaning giving alms to the birds, isn't just a practical solution to the region's rocky terrain. It's a visceral meditation on impermanence, a final act of generosity that dissolves the boundaries between body and universe. Here, mourners don't lower their loved ones into the earth. They offer them to the beaks of waiting vultures, watching as flesh becomes flight, as bone fragments are ground with barley flour for one last meal. The ritual begins at dawn with a rogiapa, or body breaker, preparing the corpse in solemn silence. There are no coffins, no embalming fluids, just a white cloth wrapped around the deceased, carried to a remote charnel ground often marked by prayer flags snapping in the wind. The rogiapa's tools are simple: a knife, a mallet, sometimes an axe. With swift, methodical strokes, they dismember the body, severing muscles from bone in a practice that mirrors Tibetan Buddhist tantric teachings about the illusion of the physical form. The skull is cracked open, the brain mixed with tsampa flour, a symbolic gesture echoing the belief that consciousness, not the body, is the true essence of being. As the scent of blood carries on the thin mountain air, the vultures descend. These aren't seen as scavengers in Tibetan culture, but as dakinis, celestial beings who carry the soul toward rebirth. Their urgency is purposeful. The faster the body vanishes, the sooner the spirit is freed from attachment. Families watch without flinching, some even smiling as the birds jostle for their share. To outsiders, this might seem jarring, but in Vajrayana Buddhism, it's the ultimate act of compassion. By giving what remains to nourish other creatures, the deceased completes their final act of selfless giving, a dana that transcends death itself. What makes sky burial so philosophically potent is its rejection of permanence. While Western traditions embalm bodies or seal them in steel caskets, Tibetan Buddhists view such practices as hindrances to the soul's journey. A grave marked with a headstone is seen as a tether binding the spirit to a decaying shell. Sky burial erases these anchors, returning the body to the cycle of existence as swiftly as a sand mandala swept away by monks. Even the bones aren't spared. After the vulture's feast, the rogiapa pulverizes the remaining skeleton, mixing it with barley to ensure nothing is wasted. Nature's perfect zero-waste system, centuries before the term existed. The ritual's roots stretch back to the Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thirdol, which describes the body as a mere vessel, empty as a discarded clay pot. But sky burial also reflects Tibet's harsh ecology. With scant soil for burial and timber too precious for cremation, the practice is as pragmatic as it is spiritual. Modern attempts to ban it, whether by Chinese officials or well-meaning outsiders, have faltered because for Tibetans, there's no contradiction between utility and sanctity. A rite that feeds endangered vultures while liberating souls isn't just tradition, it's ecological alchemy. Perhaps the most striking aspect is the joy woven into the ceremony's edges. Mourners don't wear black, they sing prayers and share butter tea, celebrating the deceased's release from suffering. When the vultures leave only wisps of cloth behind, there's no grave to visit, only the memory of wings against the infinite blue. In a world obsessed with preserving legacies in stone and steel, sky burial whispers a radical truth: that the most meaningful memorial isn't a marker, but the wind itself, carrying what we were back into the vast, unstoppable flow of existence. In the shadow of Babylon's towering ziggurats, where the Euphrates River mirrored the glow of 1,000 oil lamps, the Akitu festival unfolded like a cosmic drama written in human blood and divine fire. For 12 dizzying days each spring, the city transformed into a stage where gods walked among mortals, kings were stripped of their crowns, and the universe itself hung in the balance. At its heart stood Marduk, Babylon's patron deity, whose mythical battle against the chaos monster Tiamat wasn't just retold, it was relived, with consequences that would shape the coming year. The rituals began with a startling act of royal degradation. The king, usually draped in gold and lapis lazuli, would kneel before Marduk's statue in the Esagila temple, his robes replaced by the tattered garments of a beggar. A high priest would then strike his face once for each sin the nation needed cleansed, while the monarch recited a harrowing confession. "I have not neglected you, my lord, I have not destroyed Babylon." This wasn't mere theater. In a society where kings claimed divine right, the ritual served as a visceral reminder that even the mightiest ruler was mortal before the gods. Stripped of his regalia, the king became a vessel for collective atonement, absorbing Babylon's impurities so the new year could dawn untainted. Then came the spectacle that turned theology into adrenaline. A procession carrying Marduk's statue would wind through the Ishtar Gate, its cobalt tiles glinting as priests reenacted his voyage to the House of the New Year outside the city walls. But this journey was no peaceful parade. Actors portraying Tiamat's forces would ambush the god, their mock battles shaking the streets as crowds roared. When Marduk finally triumphed, his wooden sword striking down chaos once more, the city erupted in celebration. Contracts were renewed, debts forgiven, and prisoners pardoned in a wave of societal reset that mirrored the cosmic order's restoration. Archaeology peels back layers of this ritual's brilliance. Cuneiform tablets detail how the king's humiliation wasn't arbitrary. It mirrored the negative confession from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a shared ancient belief that renewal required reckoning. Texts describe the precise moment when the high priest would return the crown to the king, a gesture symbolizing divine reapproval that made his reign legally valid for another year. Even the festival's timing was celestial poetry. Akitu coincided with the spring equinox when day and night stood equal, a metaphor for Marduk's balancing of cosmic forces. What made Akitu revolutionary was its psychological grip. Unlike static holidays, it forced every citizen, from slave to sovereign, to participate in the universe's rebirth. Farmers donated lambs for sacrifices, weavers hung new tapestries along procession routes, and children waved palm fronds to ward off lingering demons. The festival's climax saw a sacred marriage rite where the king would symbolically couple with a priestess representing Ishtar, ensuring fertility for land and livestock. By weaving personal, political, and spiritual renewal into one explosive ceremony, the Babylonians didn't just mark time, they remade it year after fiery year. Modern echoes of Akitu pulse in our New Year's resolutions and spring cleanings, though few carry its raw intensity. In a world where leaders rarely kneel and chaos isn't battled with wooden swords, there's something stirring about a civilization that annually stared into the abyss and rewrote its destiny through ritual, one humbled king at a time. Across the ochre-red deserts and eucalyptus-scented woodlands of Australia, Aboriginal peoples performed rituals that turned the land itself into a living library of memory. The Dreamtime wasn't just a myth to them, it was the pulsing heart of existence, a time outside of time when ancestral beings shaped the world through song and movement. To walk across the outback wasn't merely a physical journey, it was tracing the footsteps of these creators, with every rock, waterhole, and mountain holding stories older than the stars. The sacred songlines, known as Yiranu in some languages, were more than navigation tools. They were melodic maps sung in precise sequences that encoded directions, sacred sites, and even survival knowledge like water sources or seasonal food cycles. A single verse might describe the angle of sunlight on a cliff face, signaling the turn toward a hidden spring. Ceremonial dances brought these stories to life in breathtaking detail. Dancers adorned with body paint mimicking animal totems, kangaroo, emu, or the rainbow serpent, moved in rhythms that mirrored the ancestral beings' journeys. The stomping of feet stirred red dust into clouds, symbolizing the moment when the first dawn light hit the desert. Clapsticks and didgeridoos provided a sonic backbone, their vibrations believed to awaken the dreaming spirits. But these weren't performances in the Western sense. Each gesture, each note was an act of co-creation, reaffirming the bond between people, land, and the eternal dreamtime. The rituals often unfolded at specific sites where the ancestral beings had performed their own acts of creation. At Uluru, for instance, ceremonies reenacted the battles of the Mala ancestors, their struggles literally etched into the rock's folds. Participants didn't just observe, they became conduits for the ancestral energy, their voices blending with echoes older than human speech. Even the act of painting up for ceremony held deep significance. White clay might represent ancestral bones, yellow ochre the life-giving sun, each stroke a prayer in pigment. What made these rituals extraordinary was their fluidity. While the core stories remained unchanged, individual clans adapted details to local landscapes, creating a tapestry of interconnected narratives across the continent. A songline about the rainbow serpent might describe freshwater pools in the tropics but salt lakes in the arid interior, yet both versions were considered equally true. This wasn't inconsistency, it was a profound recognition that the dreamtime spoke through every ecosystem's unique voice. Modern archaeology confirms how deeply these practices were rooted in daily life. Cave paintings at Gabonmong, some dating back 28,000 years, depict the same beings described in contemporary ceremonies. Rock art panels functioned like spiritual bulletin boards, marking where certain dances should be performed or where initiation rites occurred. Even today, elders pass down songlines with meticulous accuracy, their memories outlasting parchment or hard drives. The genius of dreamtime rituals lies in their seamless blend of practicality and mysticism. A song about the honey ant ancestor wasn't just a creation tale, it was a survival guide encoding the insect's nesting habits. A dance mimicking the Brolga crane's mating ritual might also teach water-finding techniques, as the birds were known to gather at hidden soaks. In a land where survival hinged on intimate knowledge of the environment, these ceremonies were both spiritual devotion and the original Wikipedia. Perhaps most moving is how these traditions endure. Despite centuries of displacement and cultural erasure, Aboriginal communities still gather under the Southern Cross to sing country into being. When an elder's voice rises in the Inma ceremony, it doesn't just recount the past, it reanimates it, proving that the dreamtime isn't a bygone era, but a layer of reality forever vibrating beneath the surface. In a world obsessed with progress, these rituals whisper an alternative truth, that sometimes the deepest wisdom isn't found by moving forward, but by standing still long enough to hear the land sing back. Beneath the ruins of ancient Carthage, where Mediterranean waves whisper against time-worn stones, archaeologists uncovered pits filled with tiny charred bones and ignited one of history's most heated debates. For centuries, accounts from Carthage's enemies described horrific rituals where infants were sacrificed to Baal Hammon, the city's chief deity. Roman historians like Diodorus Siculus wrote of bronze arms outstretched over fiery pits into which grieving parents placed their firstborn sons. But how much of this was truth and how much wartime propaganda? The answer lies in the silent testimony of the Tophet's sanctuary grounds, where urns holding cremated infant remains were buried beneath stone markers. Dozens of these urns, unearthed in modern-day Tunisia, reveal meticulous burials. Some contained amulets or carved symbols of the goddess Tanit, suggesting care rather than callousness. Forensic studies show many infants died of natural causes, premature births, illnesses before being ceremonially burned, but other findings complicate the picture. At certain sites, the bones show cut marks consistent with ritual slaughter, and inscriptions speak of mulk offerings, a term some scholars link to sacrificial rites. The most chilling evidence comes from a stele depicting a priest holding a child, its inscription reading, "To our Lord Baal Hammon, that which was vowed." The controversy hinges on interpretation. Opponents of the sacrifice theory argue these were burial sites for children who died young, their deaths sanctified by fire. They point to similar tophets in Phoenician colonies where no evidence of live sacrifice exists. Proponents counter that Carthage's own records mention Malk rituals in times of crisis, after earthquakes or before battles, when the gods demanded extreme tribute. Even the placement of some urns matters. Those near temple altars more likely held sacrificial victims, while periphery burials may have been natural deaths. What makes this debate so visceral is its collision of empathy and cultural relativism. Modern sensibilities recoil at the idea, but Carthaginians may have viewed such acts as the ultimate guarantee of divine favor, a tragic calculus where one life might save thousands. Greek historian Plutarch, while condemning the practice, noted parents who participated were neither weeping nor mourning, suggesting a belief in the child's direct ascent to the divine. Perhaps the most nuanced clue comes from Carthage's downfall. When Rome besieged the city in the 2nd century before the Common Era, desperate citizens reportedly sacrificed noble children in a final plea to Baal Hammon. Whether true or Roman slander, the story reflects a terrifying truth. Even the most civilized societies, when pushed to the brink, might blur the line between faith and desperation. In the end, the tophets remain silent witnesses, their ashes holding a question that still burns: when does devotion become destruction, and who gets to decide? In the mist-shrouded valleys of ancient Japan, where cherry blossoms fell like silent warnings, the air itself could turn malevolent when a spirit hungered for vengeance. The Goryeo Shinto exorcisms weren't just rituals, they were cosmic trials, where the living stood face to face with the furious dead, bargaining for mercy through masks, dance, and the thunder of taiko drums. These ceremonies emerged from a chilling belief: when nobles or warriors died in betrayal or injustice, their souls festered into onryo specters so powerful they could summon plagues, earthquakes, or fires with a flick of their ghostly sleeves. To pacify them, priests didn't wield brute force. They staged cathartic spectacles where rage was acknowledged, honor restored, and the boundary between the damned and the divine trembled. The most famous of these rituals centered around Sugawara no Michizane, a 9th-century scholar-statesman whose wrongful exile and death sparked a reign of supernatural terror. After his passing, Kyoto was struck by storms, floods, and the shocking death of his accusers, all blamed on Michizane's wrath. The solution: an elaborate exorcism that transformed his spirit from onryo to goryeo, a deified guardian. At Kitano Tenmangu Shrine, priests clad in multi-layered sokutai robes performed kagyora dances, their slow, precise movements mirroring the balance between human and spirit worlds. Offerings of poetry and plum blossoms, Michizane's favorite, were laid before his enshrined spirit, not as bribes, but as gestures of respect that acknowledged his pain. The climax came when a Miko shrine maiden, her voice trembling with ritual intensity, channeled Michizane's voice. His grievances heard, his status posthumously elevated to Tenjin, god of scholarship. What set goryeo rituals apart was their theatrical brilliance. Unlike Western exorcisms that sought to banish spirits, these ceremonies dramatized their suffering. At the Heian court, masked performers reenacted the dead noble's tragic ends, their wooden hanya masks contorted in eternal snarls. The audience, often including the very people who'd wronged the deceased, would weep as the ghost story unfolded, their tears believed to dilute the spirit's bitterness. Fire played a pivotal role too. Towering bonfires called goma consumed paper petitions, their smoke carrying apologies to the underworld. Even the incense was chosen carefully, aloes wood for purification, cinnamon to sweeten the spirit's disposition. Archaeology reveals how deeply these beliefs permeated daily life. Excavations near Kyoto's old execution grounds uncovered eye-high memorial tablets buried upside down, a desperate attempt to keep vengeful spirits from rising. Scrolls from the Kamakura period depict ima plaques hung at shrines, their pleas scribbled in frantic brushstrokes. Forgive us, we remember. Modern festivals like Junmatsuri still carry echoes of these rites, their massive floats symbolizing the vehicles that once carried away malignant energies. The genius of Goryeo exorcism lies in its psychological depth. The rituals didn't deny the dead's rage, they validated it, offering a narrative where pain was witnessed and justice symbolically served. In a culture that valued harmony above all, these ceremonies were pressure valves, releasing societal guilt before it could manifest as disaster. When the drums fell silent and the last chant faded, it wasn't just a spirit that was put to rest, it was the living who finally exhaled, their world realigned under the watchful eyes of gods who'd once been monsters. High in the Sierra Madre Mountains, where mist curls around ancient temples like the breath of the gods, the Zapotec civilization forged a bond with the sky so intimate they called themselves the Cloud People. Their priests didn't just watch the weather, they listened to it, deciphering whispers of wind and the flight patterns of birds as if the cosmos itself were speaking in code. At Monte Albon, the sprawling city carved into mountaintops, observatories doubled as sacred chambers where priests tracked celestial movements alongside the erratic dances of hummingbirds, believing these tiny creatures were messengers stitching together the fabric of fate. The rituals began with the careful observation of Kasijo, the storm god whose moods dictated harvests and droughts. Before dawn, priests would ascend to high-altitude shrines, their cheeks stung by the thin air, to watch the sunrise through layers of fog. A red sky at dawn wasn't just a weather sign, it was an omen of conflict, a warning etched in light. Clouds that gathered like coiled serpents over Cerro Picacho signaled impending storms, but if they drifted eastward toward Mitla, the message shifted, war was coming. The Zapotec didn't just predict rain, they read the sky's hieroglyphs, each formation a sentence in a divine dialogue. Animals played roles as vital as the elements. Priests kept tame eagles in temple courtyards, interpreting their cries as responses to unseen forces. A sudden screech at noon might confirm a noble's betrayal, while an eagle circling counterclockwise 3 times foretold a royal birth. Even insects were oracles. Ant colonies abandoning their mounds en masse weren't just fleeing floods. They were living prophecies of societal collapse, their exodus mirroring the inevitable. The most striking tool in their divinatory arsenal was the tease, ampantli, a wooden framework not of skulls as seen with the Aztecs but of hollowed gourds. Filled with varying amounts of water and struck with mallet-like instruments, these gourds emitted pitches that priests matched to tonal patterns in birdsong. A sequence mimicking the call of a mountain trogon meant abundant maize, while dissonant notes warned of famine. Modern acoustic studies reveal these gourds could produce frequencies audible for miles, turning the entire valley into a resonating chamber for divine communication. Archaeology confirms how deeply this system was embedded in governance. Excavated codices show weather symbols alongside records of kings' decisions, proof that statecraft was inseparable from celestial interpretation. At the ancient plaza of Atsompa, a stone slab etched with swirling cloud motifs aligns with the summer solstice sunrise, casting shadows that once guided ritual timing. Even today, Zapotec descendants in Oaxacan villages consult the flight of Chuparosa hummingbirds before planting crops, a thread of tradition stretching back millennia. What sets the Cloud People apart is their refusal to separate science from spirituality. Their weather divination wasn't superstition, it was early meteorology wrapped in sacred context. By tracking cloud movements against seasonal bird migrations, they created a predictive model as sophisticated as any almanac, just one filtered through the lens of animism. In their world, a cold wind wasn't just a front moving in. It was the sigh of an ancestor, a warning scribbled across the sky in vaporous ink. To ignore it wasn't just impractical, it was disrespectful, a dismissal of the dialogue between earth and heavens that sustained life itself. The genius of Zapotec divination lies in its humility. Where other cultures sought to control the future through sacrifice or sorcery, the Cloud People positioned themselves as students of nature's rhythms. Their rituals remind us that prophecy isn't about bending destiny to our will, but learning to listen. To the way rain hisses through dry cornfields, to the precise angle a vulture tilts its wings before a storm. In an age of satellite forecasts, there's poetry in their belief that the simplest signs, a beetle's path, the weight of dew on a spiderweb, held the universe's secrets, waiting to be read by those patient enough to watch. When the summer solstice sun lingered longest over Slavic villages, bathing golden wheat fields in liquid amber light, communities gathered for a night when magic wasn't just believed, it was expected. Cupola night, named for the pagan water deity Cupola, transformed meadows into living altars where fire and water, two opposing forces, intertwined in a dance of purification and fertility. As twilight deepened, young men stacked logs into towering pyres, their flames licking the violet sky while girls wove flower crowns from chamomile and ferns, each blossom chosen not for beauty alone, but for the protective powers whispered in their roots. The fire-jumping ritual stood at the heart of the celebrations. Couples joined hands and leaped over bonfires, their silhouettes flickering against the night. A successful jump meant more than bravery. It promised a year of health and strong love, while faltering hinted at misfortune. Some villages took it further. Mothers tossed swaddled herbs into the flames, believing the smoke could cure childhood ailments, and newlyweds sprinted through ember-strewn paths to prove their union could withstand life's burns. The fires weren't just obstacles, they were thresholds separating the mundane from the miraculous. Meanwhile, the forests pulsed with another kind of hunt. At midnight, when dew glistened like crushed diamonds on leaves, villagers slipped into the woods seeking the mythical fern flower, a blossom said to bloom for mere moments, granting its finder the ability to understand animal speech or uncover hidden treasures. In reality, they gathered medicinal herbs, St. John's wort for protection, yarrow for love, each plant believed to reach peak potency under the solstice's enchanted light. Women sang ancient incantations as they harvested, their melodies threading through the trees like invisible spells. Love divinations turned the night into a playground of fate. Unmarried girls floated their wreaths on rivers. If a boy retrieved one, their courtship was sealed by destiny. Some buried blades of grass in water overnight. Curling strands meant reciprocated affection, while limp ones foretold heartache. In Belarus, a unique ritual involved rolling burning wheels downhill. If the flames extinguished before reaching the bottom, drought loomed. Every act, from the playful to the perilous, blurred the line between game and sacrament. Archaeology hints at how deeply Cupola roots stretch. Excavations near Kiev uncovered clay figurines of intertwined couples dating to the 10th century, their bodies wrapped in floral motifs matching solstice rituals. Folklorists note how Christian attempts to rebrand the festival as St. John's Eve failed to erase its pagan core. Instead, it absorbed new layers, like the tradition of washing in mourning due to retain youth. Modern revivals from Poland to Siberia still feature naked leaps over fires, proving some embers never fully die. What makes Cupola night so enduring isn't just its spectacle, but its acknowledgement of life's dualities. The fire that could heal also tested courage. The water that cleansed also drowned wreaths of hope. In a single night, Slavs celebrated light's triumph while flirting with darkness, their laughter echoing the ancient truth that magic thrives where opposites collide. Even now, when the year's longest day fades, you might hear echoes of their songs not in museums, but in the crackle of bonfires and the rustle of leaves where the old gods linger just beyond the firelight. At the precise moment the spring equinox balances day and night, Persian households around the world gather around a table shimmering with 7 sacred items, each beginning with the Farsi letter, Sin, each a key to unlocking renewal. The Haft scene isn't just a festive centerpiece, it's a Zoroastrian ritual frozen in time, a 3,000-year-old blueprint for rebirth that transforms homes into microcosms of the universe. Picture the scene, a crisp white cloth spread like fresh snow, adorned with mirrors to reflect the past year's lessons, goldfish swimming in bowls to embody life's fluidity, and candles flickering defiantly against the vanishing dark. But the true magic lies in the 7 symbolic anchors carefully arranged not for aesthetics, but as alchemical ingredients for spiritual metamorphosis. First comes sabzé lentils or wheat sprouts bursting from a dish, their tender green tendrils symbolizing nature's stubborn resurgence. Next to it rests samanu, a sweet pudding stirred for hours until its wheat germ transforms into velvet, a testament to patience yielding abundance. Then senged, the silverberry's dried fruit, wrinkled like an elder's fingers yet bursting with sweetness, reminding us that wisdom often hides in unlikely places. Garlic sir stands guard against malice, while apples sib blush with health and beauty. The tart punch of sumac represents the sunrise's crimson edge, and vinegar sirke carries the tang of time's passage, preserving lessons in its sharpness. Together, they form an edible mandala, a feast for the soul before the body. But the haftseen's genius lies in its elasticity. Over centuries, it absorbed layers of meaning like a cultural sponge. Ancient Zoroastrians viewed the table as a battlefield where light, represented by candles, clashed with darkness, the mirror's void. Sufis later wove in the poetry of Rumi, seeing the sprouting greens as the soul's longing for the divine. Modern Iranian families might add a Quran or Hafez's divan, blending Islam's reverence with pre-Islamic roots. Even the goldfish, a relatively recent addition, swims with symbolism, its bowl reflecting the zodiac's Pisces, the sign presiding over Nowruz. Archaeology whispers of this ritual's endurance. At Persepolis, stone reliefs depict servants carrying sprouted grains to kings during spring festivals, while medieval manuscripts describe royals distributing samanu to the poor as a blessing. Today, diaspora communities from Los Angeles to Berlin adapt the tradition, replacing wheatgrass with alfalfa in arid climates, or using quinoa sprouts for gluten-free households. Yet the core remains untouched, a tactile prayer for balance, where every bite of apple and whiff of hyacinth flowers, often placed alongside, becomes an act of communion with ancestors. What makes Noah's table transcendent is its insistence on joy as a sacred duty. Unlike summer New Year's resolutions, this ritual demands laughter, new clothes, and visits to relatives, because renewal isn't just internal, it's relational. When families jump over bonfires in the week before Nowruz, chanting, "Give me your red hue, take back my pallor," they're not just mimicking Zoroastrian fire rituals, they're enacting a cosmic trade, swapping stagnation for vitality. The haftseen doesn't just symbolize hope, it materializes it, turning a dining table into an altar where pomegranates burst with promises and even vinegar's bitterness serves a purpose, to remind us that growth often starts with a sting. After all these millennia, the message still holds: spring doesn't come gently. It must be summoned, one sacred scene at a time. In the emerald valleys and black sand beaches of ancient Hawaii, a single misstep, eating the wrong fish, walking in the wrong footsteps, even letting your shadow fall where it shouldn't, could mean death. This was the kapu system, a web of sacred laws so tightly woven into daily life that breaking one wasn't just a crime, it was an offense against the gods themselves. Unlike modern taboos, which are often unspoken social rules, kapu carried divine weight, enforced by priests and chiefs with terrifying efficiency. The word itself means forbidden, but its implications ran far deeper. These were the threads that held Hawaiian society together, dictating everything from meal times to mating seasons with celestial precision. Gender divisions formed the backbone of kapu. Men and women ate separately, with certain foods like pork, bananas, and coconuts forbidden to women entirely. These weren't arbitrary restrictions. They mirrored the Hawaiian creation myth where the god Ku sacrificed himself to become the first coconut tree, his body transforming into food that could only be touched by those who embodied his masculine energy. Cooking fires for men's meals burned in different pits, and women caught even glancing at a man's meal could face strangulation or clubbing. The Hail Muir men's eating house stood apart from family dwellings, its threshold a boundary as sacred as a temple door. But the most lethal kapu involved alii, the high chiefs. Their shadows were considered extensions of their monad divine power, and to cast your shadow upon a chief's resting place or footprint was akin to stealing their soul. Commoners dropped to their stomachs when a chief passed, pressing their faces into the earth to avoid even accidental eye contact. The punishment, often instant execution, sometimes by drowning or being crushed under a rock. Even chiefs weren't immune. If one entered another's territory without performing the proper rituals, they risked sparking wars that could last generations. What made kapu uniquely potent was its connection to nature's rhythms. Fishing bans during spawning seasons weren't environmental policy, they were edicts from the god Kanaloa, ruler of the ocean. Farmers planting taro under specific moon phases didn't follow agricultural science but the dictates of Lono, god of fertility. The system functioned as an ecological covenant, ensuring reefs weren't overfished and forests weren't overharvested long before the concept of sustainability existed. When Captain Cook's crew ignorantly broke kapu by taking firewood from a sacred grove, locals didn't see foreigners, they saw blasphemers inviting tsunami and famine. The system's collapse came dramatically in 1819, when Queen Kahumanu defied centuries of tradition by eating alongside King Kamehameha II in a ceremony called the Ai Noa, the free eating. This act shattered the gender kapu overnight, signaling that God's laws could bow to human will. Yet remnants linger. Modern Hawaiians still avoid sweeping at night, a kapu against disturbing ancestral spirits, or whistle after dark believed to summon ghosts. The kapu system's shadow, once deadly, now whispers through island customs, a reminder that even the strictest taboos can fade, but their echoes never truly vanish. Among the scorched cliffs of Mali's Bandiagara escarpment, where the desert meets the sky in a haze of ochre dust, the Dogon people perform a ceremony so vast it unfolds once every 60 years, the length of a human life, and the precise orbital period of Sirius B, the invisible star their ancestors described centuries before telescopes confirmed its existence. The Sigwi ceremony isn't just a festival, it's a living cosmology, a reenactment of creation itself, where masked dancers become celestial bodies and every footstep traces the path of primordial energy. Imagine the scene, elder priests emerging from cave sanctuaries with masks carved from the sacred ogon tree, their towering forms swaying like stilt-legged giants as drums pulse rhythms older than written history. Each mask is a constellation given flesh, the serpentine kanoga representing the axis of the universe, the multi-tiered satim embodying the first woman who descended from the stars to bring wisdom to humanity. The ceremony begins in secrecy, deep in the togu, na the men's meeting house where elders chant the origin story of Amma, the creator god who shaped the cosmos from a single grain of millet. For 7 years leading up to the main event, the Dogon craft Olam masks, their surfaces incised with symbols mapping Sirius's binary star system. This isn't artistry, it's sacred cartography. When worn, these masks transform their bearers into Namo amphibious beings who, according to Dogon lore, arrived from Sirius to civilize humanity. The dancers' movements are deliberate, their bodies undulating in mimicry of the Namo's aquatic origins, while the rhythm of the drums mirrors the pulse of Sirius B's 60-year orbit, a heartbeat preserved in sound. What stuns astronomers isn't just the ritual's beauty, but its precision. The Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B, a white dwarf star invisible to the naked eye, was documented by French anthropologists in the 1930s, centuries before modern astronomy confirmed its existence. Their lore describes the star as heavy as all the grains on Earth, a poetic nod to its incredible density. During Sigwi, elders use sand paintings to illustrate Sirius A&B's elliptical dance, tracing patterns that match astrophysical models with eerie accuracy. How did a people without telescopes acquire this knowledge? Some scholars suggest ancient contact with advanced civilizations. Others argue it's the result of millennia of meticulous observation passed down through oral tradition. The climax of Sigwi is the Dhamma, a funeral rite intertwined with the cosmic celebration. As masked performers spiral around the remains of the deceased, their movements symbolize the soul's journey back to Sirius, carried by the Nomo's celestial canoe. Villagers scatter millet and blood offerings to sustain the dead on their voyage, while women ululate in harmonies that ripple through the cliffs like stellar waves. The ceremony's end isn't marked by applause but by silence. Participants remove their masks and place them in caves, where they'll slowly decay over the next 60 years, returning to the earth like stars fading at dawn. What makes Sigwi unforgettable is its refusal to separate science from spirit. Where Western cosmology relies on equations, the Dogon use dance. Where textbooks offer diagrams, they offer masks that breathe. This isn't primitive superstition, it's a different kind of knowing, one where the universe isn't observed but lived. When the last drum falls silent and the dancers vanish into the cliffs, the message lingers: the cosmos isn't just above us. It's within us, written in the curve of a mask, the rhythm of a footstep, the patient wait for Sirius to complete its slow, celestial waltz. And in 60 years, when the next Sigwi begins, the stars will lean closer to listen. In the heart of ancient Rome, where the icy breath of February still clung to the marble columns, a festival erupted that would make even the most decadent emperor blush. The Lupercalia wasn't just a fertility rite, it was a raucous, primal explosion of flesh and faith, where young noblemen shed their togas along with their dignity, dashing through the streets naked but for the bloody hides of freshly sacrificed goats. This was no subtle prayer for spring's return. It was a full-bodied scream into the winter's face, a ritual so visceral it blurred the line between sacrament and spectacle. The madness began at the Lupercal, a cave beneath the Palatine Hill where Romans believed the she-wolf had suckled Romulus and Remus. Here, priests known as Luperci sacrificed goats and dog animals representing virility and protection, their blades slicing through flesh as hymns to Faunus, the horned god of wild places, rose in the cold air. But the true transformation came next. The priests smeared their bodies with the sacrificial blood, then sliced the goat skins into whipping strips called febua. Stripped bare, they charged into the streets, their laughter echoing off brick walls as they playfully lashed any woman who crossed their path. Far from recoiling, Roman women surged forward, baring arms and backs to receive the strikes. Each stinging blow was believed to purge infertility, ensuring easy childbirth and passionate unions. Historical accounts describe newlywed brides positioning themselves eagerly in the whipper's paths, their faces flushed with anticipation rather than fear. The irony was delicious. In a society where female modesty was prized, Lupercalia granted women license to demand this ritualized violation, their bodies becoming canvases for communal hope. Yet Lupercalia's chaos served a deeper social function. The Luperci weren't random revelers, they were often patrician youths on the cusp of manhood. Their naked sprint mirrored Romulus's mythical band of outlaws, symbolically reenacting Rome's raw, unfettered origins before laws and laundries tamed the wildness from its soul. Even though route mattered, the runners circled the Palatine's ancient boundary, a living purification ring that shielded the city from malevolent spirits. The festival's legacy pulses in surprising places. When Pope Gelasius banned Lupercalia in the 5th century, he grafted its energy onto Valentine's Day, our modern chocolates and roses whispering of goat blood and bear skin. More startling, the ritual's name lives on in February's etymology, from febuum, meaning purification. Modern fertility clinics may use syringes instead of hides, but the longing remains unchanged, to coax life from winter's grip, one wild, laughing strike at a time. Beneath the cracked earth of China's Yellow River Valley, where the Shang dynasty once ruled with divine authority, kings sought counsel not from advisors but from fire and bone. Oracle bones, tortoise plastrons, and ox scapulae were more than ritual objects. They were the hotlines to the spirit world, where cracks from controlled burns became prophecies carved in the earliest forms of Chinese script. Picture a Shang diviner hunched over a polished bone, his bronze tool glowing red-hot as he pressed it into pre-drilled hollows. The hiss of burning keratin filled the air as smoke coiled upward, carrying questions to the ancestors. Will the harvest flourish? Should we wage war? The answer wasn't spoken, it was spiderwebbed across the bone's surface in a labyrinth of fractures, a celestial Morse code only the initiated could decipher. What made these rituals revolutionary was their marriage of mysticism and bureaucracy. Each cracked bone was meticulously catalogued, its verdicts etched alongside the original questions in angular proto-characters, the direct ancestors of modern Chinese writing. Over 120,000 fragments survive, revealing a government that operated on divination. A single excavation pit at Yingzhou, the Shang capital, yielded 17,000 bones, some bearing revisions where cracks were read differently after events unfolded. This wasn't fortune-telling, it was cosmic record-keeping, with scribes noting even failed predictions, like a king's headache persisting despite sacrificial promises. The cracks themselves followed a sacred geometry. Diviners sought jiao cracks, long, branching fractures resembling lightning, as signs of ancestral approval, while cross-grained bu cracks signaled descent. Some bones show evidence of repeated heating, as if priests demanded clearer answers from stubborn spirits. The most chilling examples involve posthumous inscriptions, where cracks were interpreted retroactively after battles or natural disasters, bending the cosmic narrative to justify human failures. Archaeology reveals how deeply this practice permeated Shang society. High-ranking diviners had their names carved into bones, their status immortalized alongside royal decrees. Some oracle bones mention lunar eclipses so accurately that modern astronomers use them to date Shang reigns. But the most haunting finds are the practice bones, discarded fragments with amateur etchings, suggesting apprentice diviners honed their skills before handling matters of state. What resonates today is how these rituals birthed a writing system that outlasted empires. Those early characters born from scorched cracks evolved into the logograms used by billions. The Shang didn't just seek answers, they etched uncertainty into permanence, turning cracks in bone into the foundation of a civilization's memory. In those blackened fragments, we see the moment when prophecy became history and the whispers of ghosts became the voice of a culture. On the sun-baked mesas of Arizona, where the air shimmers with heat and the earth cracks with thirst, the Hopi people perform a ceremony that defies modern sensibilities. A dance where live snakes coil around bare arms and teeth skim dangerously close to unprotected skin. The snake dance isn't spectacle, it's a sacred plea, a 9-day ritual where humans become bridges between the physical and spiritual realms, channeling the raw power of the serpent to summon life-giving rain. Imagine the scene, dancers in ceremonial kilts embroidered with lightning bolts, their bodies painted with sacred cornmeal, moving in hypnotic circles as rattlesnakes and bull snakes gathered days earlier from the desert are pressed against their lips in a kiss of trust. The snakes aren't just participants, they're honored messengers carrying prayers for water down to the underworld where the rain gods dwell. Preparation begins in kivas, underground chambers where snake priests fast and pray, handling the reptiles until both human and creature move as one. The snakes are bathed in yucca suds, their flicking tongues believed to cleanse the prayers whispered into their coiled bodies. On the final day, the dancers emerge into the plaza, their movements mirroring the serpent's undulations, a deliberate mimicry that blurs the line between species. As drums pound and chanters invoke the cloud beings, the dancers clutch snakes in their mouths, teeth lightly gripping behind the heads, while other serpents dangle from their arms like living bracelets. To outsiders, it seems reckless. To the Hopi, it's an act of profound reciprocity. The snakes, embodying the ancestral spirits called Katsanom, willingly lend their power to those who treat them with reverence. The ritual's genius lies in its layered symbolism. The snakes, shedding their skins annually, represent renewal and the cyclical nature of water's return. Their sinuous path echoes the zigzag of lightning, while their earthbound bodies mirror the roots of corn, the Hopi's sacred sustenance. When released at the dance's climax, the snakes slither back into the desert, their journey home believed to trace the path of rain clouds forming on the horizon. Elders say the snakes carry the people's desperation to the underworld, where the deities Palulukang and Balalarikong control the floodgates of the sky. Archaeologists have noted striking parallels between the Hopi ceremony and ancient Puebloan snake iconography. Petroglyphs at Mesa Verde depict horned serpents swimming through stylized rain clouds, images that mirror the dance's purpose. Even the timing is celestial. The ritual aligns with the late summer monsoon season, when the land's need is most dire. Modern meteorology can't explain why storms often follow the dance, but Hopi oral history recounts years when rains arrived within hours of the snake's release, their scales still glistening from ceremonial washing. What unsettles and inspires isn't just the risk, but the intimacy of this interspecies dialogue. The Hopi don't dominate the snakes, they partner with them, acknowledging a truth Western ecology now confirms: that survival in the desert hinges on delicate alliances. In an age of climate collapse, the snake dance whispers an uncomfortable question: have we forgotten how to ask nature for help instead of demanding it? When the dancers finally wash the snake scent from their hands in a ritual basin, the water isn't discarded. It's poured onto cornfields, completing the circle. Prayer given, prayer answered. The earth and sky bound together by scales and sweat and unshakable faith. From the blood-stained steps of Mesoamerican temples to the whispered chants of Polynesian shark callers, one truth echoes across time and geography: humanity has always sought to touch the divine through ritual. These 25 ancient ceremonies reveal not just the ingenuity of lost civilizations, but the universal human yearning to make sense of life's mysteries, to bargain with forces beyond our control, to mourn what we cannot keep, and to celebrate what we dare not take for granted. Whether through the Maya's ecstatic bloodletting or the Zapotec's cloud divination, our ancestors built bridges between the seen and unseen, each culture crafting its own language of the sacred from the materials at hand, be it obsidian, starlight, or the flickering pulse of a bull's heart. What's striking isn't just the diversity of these practices, but the shared emotions pulsing beneath them. The Inca's Capacocha and Tibet's sky burial both grappled with mortality, one lifting children to the gods, the other returning bodies to the elements. The Dogon's celestial masks and the Hopi's serpent dances both transformed performers into living conduits for cosmic forces. Even rituals separated by oceans, like Rome's Lupercalia and Japan's Goryeo exorcisms, sought to purify through controlled chaos, whether with goat-hide whips or thundering taiko drums. These weren't primitive superstitions. They were sophisticated attempts to navigate existence's deepest waters, using the tools each culture deemed most powerful. Perhaps what lingers most is how these rituals challenge our modern assumptions. The Olmec's were jaguar trances remind us that consciousness has frontiers we've barely explored, while the Eleusinian mysteries suggest some truths resist language, demanding to be felt rather than explained. The Shang's oracle bones show how divination birthed writing itself, proof that magic and pragmatism often entwine in unexpected ways. Even the Kapu system's strict taboos reveal an ecological wisdom we're only now rediscovering, that survival sometimes requires sacred boundaries. As the echoes of these ceremonies fade into history, they leave us with provocative questions. Which rituals speak to you most? Is it the raw intimacy of the Minoan bull leapers, defying death with nothing but grace? or the quiet precision of the Agnakayana where every brick held a hymn. Perhaps it's the shark caller's fearless dialogue with nature, or the cloud people's belief that prophecy hums in every breeze. Share your thoughts below, and if you know of other enigmatic traditions lost to time, let's resurrect them in the comments. Because the past isn't just a graveyard of forgotten gods, it's a mirror reflecting our endless, restless search for meaning in a universe that still keeps its deepest secrets